All right, so quick reference breakdown of my tools. Got my paint palette with the paint still on it. I've got my Vallejo paints here. Up here is what I used for the skin, orange brown, and this is called, this moved over, skin tone, which is, obviously a Caucasian skin tone. I've used burnt red and red leather for the boots and the chin strap. I mixed in a little bit of this sunset orange for some highlights on the boots themselves. I mean, it's real subtle, you can barely see. I used it on the laces as well. The laces could have also just been like pale sand and white, or they could have been brown. I've seen pictures with both. Again, extreme accuracy isn't really the goal. It's really about the application of the paint and making something look awesome and getting better at painting. The first layer after the prime, which is black, was then this, I don't have US Olive Drab in my arsenal right now, but I do and plan on getting it to compare. But I used Cam Olive Green, which is short for camouflage, as the base. Then I built up the highlights on that with khaki to give it this lighter effect. And then I mixed in a bit of pale sand with the khaki to go up a step higher in highlight and make it pop a little bit more in contrast. So you can see the back is actually a bit darker because I went a bit brighter on the highlights on the front because that's where the focus is. I also used middle stone and medium gray for all the straps, as well as the shovel pouch. And I left the canteen army green because I saw different things and it used in different ways, and I didn't want to focus too much on that since the real focus was on the front of the figure. I didn't spend a lot of time painting the face. So this is sort of the trade-off when you're painting and trying to share on YouTube. Like, how much time do you spend on things before you get hunkered down so much in one area that the video just becomes about that, right? So this video is more about creating an overall look and aesthetic. Because he's got this hat on, it casts a dark shadow over his eyes. And because I added the realism of the leafage, the foliage, and the ground effects, that becomes more of the focus rather than the eyes. So I decided to focus more on creating a realistic figure with the uniform colors and the actual setting he's in, rather than like the eyes, because this is gonna look awesome. This looks awesome at in person. The camera does pick up like every little detail because it's HD, so you kind of get these. Sometimes it looks a little jarring, especially like in areas that I didn't spend a ton of time perfectly blending, like underneath the arm here. But for the purposes of on the tabletop and for practicing, a lot of the key things that I was focusing on is creating a dramatic piece. Really, I think this works great. So let's dive into what I used for the tufts. I used a basic brush, just like any crappy brush really, and I applied the Vallejo thick mud to the ground, and then in the ground I stuck a few of these different tufts that I have, and I used swamp tufts. This is just like grassland, I believe, or highland, and then these yellow flowers I have. I don't have the names on them anymore, but these are all by Army Painter. Army Painter makes some pretty decent tufts. There are more realistic ones out there if you want to go for like hyper realism. I think there's some brands out there. I don't know them off the top of my head, but I think Geek Game Scenics makes some. They're out there. You just Google what's out there. I think Green Stuff World probably sells some more realistic ones as well. In addition, I used to the paints, I used the Earthshade on the test model, and then I've got my brushes. So the brushes vary pretty widely from 2 down to 00 for the finest details. I've got, these are all Green Stuff World, these are the Silver series. I've been a little rough with them. They could be in a bit better shape. I'm kind of disappointed actually with myself in some regard on how they've held up, maybe just through aggressive cleaning. Maybe I'm a bit too aggressive with the cleaning at times. But I've also got this AK Interactive number 2 that I use. It's sort of like a workhorse broad application paintbrush. It's also like not in the best shape. It was great, and I think I was just too liberal with some of the paint application, and it dried too much in the furl. So even after multiple cleanings, it's still fraying. So not the best job on my part. I could do better. These things I'm always trying to get better with, like taking care of my brushes, and it's just a matter of consistently cleaning them correctly. So it's something I'm always trying to learn more about and do better at to maintain the length of them. But I'm probably going to be needing another set of brushes that I can, you know, practice continuously with and try to do an even better job with in the coming months, just to keep those points nice and crisp, because they are starting to lose them even after reshaping. And then I've got this number 1 brush that's just an old brush I have. This was my grandmother's before she passed away, and I just kind of keep it. I do a lot less with it because I want to keep it in good condition, but it is sort of like a broad. It's a number 1, so it's pretty broad. It holds a good amount of paint. I use it sparingly. It doesn't really have a good tip, so it's like it's like at my discretion, like when would be a good time to use it if I don't need a very fine tip and maybe want to apply a bit broader strokes. Like it's good for coverage in the first layer, like if for applying the camo green. I'll go over that as I get into the details moving forward. Let's go. So I'll jump in here at key parts and kind of give you some info on what I'm doing, give you a bit of audio commentary as it happens. And what you see me doing here is applying the first layer of the camo olive green. I'm going for even coverage, so this is going to require a couple coats, but for the purposes of this video, I've sort of trimmed it down so you can see some of the key highlights of the application process. I'm really trying to demonstrate the coverage overall. I'm applying this again over the Vallejo black primer. Next, I'm going to introduce some khaki. I'm actually going to water this down to about a 1-to-1 mixture, water to khaki, and then start to apply it in a light coat. This will act as like a medium between the low light of the camo green and what will be the highlight of pure khaki mixed with a little bit of pale sand, which will come a little later. At this stage, I was trying to be very deliberate with where I was putting the paint. I was aiming to try and capture those highlights while also trying to retain some of the darkness of the darker green. Painting like this is, I think, some of the most satisfying. You get to see the contrast develop in real time, and you also get the satisfaction of seeing the paint cover real evenly. It's going on very smooth here. I wanted to show this application because I think it's a good representation of how I like to paint, particularly with starting with very thin lines and then building them up gradually to create a more opaque highlight. So right now it's more like a mid-tone before we get into mixing the pale sand with the khaki color. But the coverage and the application flow I just thought were really nice, and it's fun to apply and it's fun to look back at and watch. So here I've got some red leather. I think it works great for the boots. One thing I've been considering is going back in and using the Agrax Earth Shade over top of the boots only, not the entire figure, to darken them up. I think the boots on the test model, which you can see to the left of my hand right here, look great. They have the wash applied. I went with Middlestone for all of the straps and pouches because I thought it was a nice mustardy yellow color that offset well enough against the khaki that it looked like it belonged with it without blending into it entirely like the khaki or a field drab might. Here's when I start to introduce the Vallejo orange brown to the face. This ends up being essentially a mid-tone between the black and what will be added later, the skin tone. I go ahead and I mix in a little bit of skin tone with the orange brown to create a one-to-one mix that sort of adds another dimension for the highlight. So here you can see me mixing it up, and then I apply a skin tone on top of that to create additional highlights. At no point do I ever add white at this stage because the face wasn't something I spent a lot of time on. I really just wanted to get the focus to be on the overall aesthetic of the model, and I didn't want to get too hunkered down on the details of the face. That's why I also didn't paint the eyes. This next bit is when I start to add pale sand to the khaki color, and then I very slowly, deliberately try to find the highlights that I want to focus on, and then building those up stroke by stroke. Very small strokes to begin, moving the brush around the miniature, just really feeling it out, seeing where I want those brightest highlights to be, and then eventually going in and filling in, blocking in the broader shapes. So here I'm using a number 2 brush, and I like the number 2 when I'm going to be using the same paint across a lot of area. So the jacket and the pants are the same color, and here I've mixed in pale sand with khaki, and I'm finding those highlights and picking them out. So what I like to do is have the bigger brush that can hold on to more moisture and more paint, and it takes me further in the painting process. I don't have to keep refilling and going back and forth. Here I'm breaking out the Vallejo thick mud. This is a European mud. I think it's a great texture for adding little tufts to it and little pieces of sand, debris, whatever you want to build on top of the base, because it will dry hard, so you don't need additional glue. I still end up using it because I came back to the base after a short break and it was dry, so I needed to add some Elmer's glue, which is a good adhesive for this type of work. But what's nice is when you've got it nice and thick and wet here, you can just stick the tufts right in there and they'll dry relatively quickly. I mean, usually within 8 hours, you're good to go and you can start doing additional scenery work with it. It's nice, it's fun, and it's got a nice realistic color to it as a base. And yeah, these are the Army Painter Swamp. These are swamp tufts, and I believe those are Highland tufts. I don't remember exactly what they were, but I wanted some variety in color, and I think that I've got enough here that kind of gives it a very natural look. I mean, it's a little stylized. Obviously, they're not exactly European plants. I don't have a specific set of shrubbery that matches the European environment, but they're close enough. These are fun twigs I have. This is actually dried up mum branches from last year. I had broken them all off and thrown them away into the compost and realized that a lot of the branches look like dried up trees. So I saved them. They're extremely brittle. They break apart really easily, and they make great little settings like this. And my original intention was to make some trees out of them using a green moss that I have, but they're so brittle now that it's pretty impractical, but it was a good idea. And then here I am adding some yellow wildflowers that I have. This is also Army Painter. I forget the exact name of them, but I think they add a little bit of vibrancy to the piece, and it's nice because they match the middle stone color of the straps too, which is a nice little tie-in. And here I've got some porous rocks. These were for terrariums that I was building a while back. And inside, I was going to use these rocks, but the stark white in the base was like too much, I thought. But I did have some strange pieces of debris in there that I decided to just plug in. I thought they looked kind of cool, like little plants. Next, I wanted to add some more leaves. Now that everything was dry, I came back to this a little while later, and I put a little bit of Elmer's glue on my finger and just started dabbing these little miniature leaves that I got from eBay. Link in the description, as well as everything else. It's just sort of tapping them in where I could fit them onto the edges of the base, and then I decided to use them on the helmet as well, which is pretty funny because I painted the helmet and I thought that looked pretty good, but in my original Army Men painting video I did this as well, but I never demonstrated how I did it, so I thought this would be a good opportunity to go into a bit more detail on that, because I actually recorded it this time. So yeah, I thought that looked pretty cool. Here's the final result. Please let me know down in the comments how you think I did, if you do anything differently, and what you'd like to see next. Thank you for watching.